The realtor's office smelled like cheap air freshener and broken dreams. Marcus Rivera sat in a plastic chair that squeaked every time he shifted his weight, watching the woman across the desk shuffle through papers with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. His daughter Sofia pressed against his side, her small hand clutching his jacket. She was 5 years old, wearing shoes that were half a size too small because Marcus couldn't afford new ones yet. The food bank voucher in his wallet was already used for the week, and his phone had 17 missed calls from debt collectors he couldn't answer. The realtor, a woman named Patricia Chen with tired eyes and a professional smile, finally looked up from her computer screen. "Mr. Rivera, I need to be completely honest with you. This property is not what most buyers would consider desirable." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd driven 3 hours to this meeting, burning gas money he didn't have, based on an email about a house within his impossible budget. "How bad are we talking?" Patricia pulled up photographs on her monitor and turned it toward him. The house looked like something from a horror movie. Sagging roof, windows boarded up, paint peeling in long strips to reveal rotting wood underneath. Weeds had overtaken what might have once been a yard, growing tall enough to reach the first-floor windows. "The previous owner died 6 months ago," Patricia said, her voice careful and measured. No heirs stepped forward to claim it. "The county seized it for back taxes. They're selling it as is, which means no inspections, no warranties, no guarantee it won't collapse the first time someone sneezes inside it." Marcus had done enough research to know what as is meant. It meant desperation on both sides of the transaction. Patricia nodded. "The asking price is $500. Marcus blinked. "500? For an entire house, plus closing costs, which will run you another $1,000 or so. And Mr. Rivera, I need you to understand that this property will require extensive work. We're talking foundation issues, electrical that hasn't been updated since 1960, plumbing that's mostly corroded, and structural damage from water intrusion. A contractor estimated it would cost at least $70,000 to make it livable. $70,000 might as well have been $70 million. Marcus had $1,700 in his checking account, saved penny by penny over 6 months of working double shifts at the warehouse. It was supposed to be first and last month's rent on an apartment, a fresh start for him and Sofia after the eviction. "Can I see it?" The words came out before Marcus could stop them. Patricia studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Rivera, I appreciate your interest, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that you'd be better served finding a rental. This house is a money pit. It'll swallow whatever resources you have and leave you worse off than you started." "I've been looking for rentals for 4 months," Marcus said, his voice tight. "Every landlord wants first, last, security deposit, plus proof of income 3 times the rent. I make $32,000 a year. Do you know what qualifies for with that income? Nothing. Absolutely nothing in a 50-mile radius." Sofia tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, what's a money pit?" "It's a place that eats all your money, Mija," Marcus said softly, smoothing her hair back. "Like a monster." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I have a daughter about her age. I understand the pressure you're under. But Mr. Rivera, this house has been sitting empty for 6 months because nobody wants it. The county just wants it off their books. If you buy this property and it becomes unsafe, Child Protective Services could get involved. Is that a risk you're willing to take?" Marcus thought about the motel room they were currently living in. $49 a night, paid daily because they wouldn't give him a weekly rate without a credit card. He thought about Sofia sleeping in the same bed, waking up when trucks rumbled through the parking lot at 3 a.m. He thought about how she'd started having accidents at kindergarten because she was too nervous to ask where the bathroom was in their temporary housing. "I need to see it," Marcus said quietly. "Please, even if it's impossible, I need to see what $500 could buy." Patricia sighed, but she pulled out a key ring. "I'll drive you out there now. But Mr. Rivera, I'm going to make you promise me something. If we walk in there and you see that it's genuinely unsafe for a child, you'll walk away." "Deal." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure it was a promise he could keep. The house sat at the end of a dirt road 20 minutes outside of town, surrounded by empty fields that had gone to seed years ago. As they pulled up, Marcus felt his stomach drop. The photographs hadn't captured the full extent of the decay. The front porch had a hole in it big enough to lose a leg through. The chimney had partially collapsed, leaving bricks scattered across the roof. One of the upstairs windows had shattered, leaving jagged glass teeth around the frame. Vines covered the entire east side of the structure, so thick they'd started pulling the gutters away from the roofline. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered. Sofia pressed her face against the car window. "It looks like the witch's house in my storybook." Patricia turned off the engine, but didn't move to get out. "Last chance to turn around, Mr. Rivera." Marcus looked at his daughter's reflection in the window. 5 years old, wearing a dress from the Goodwill that someone else's child had outgrown. She deserved better than motel rooms and uncertainty. She deserved a home, even if that home was falling apart. "Let's go inside." They picked their way across the yard carefully, avoiding sinkholes and piles of debris. Patricia tested the porch boards before putting her full weight on them, pointing out which sections Marcus should avoid. The front door opened with a groan that sounded almost human, revealing darkness inside. Patricia pulled out a flashlight. "Power's been shut off for 6 months. Watch your step." The entrance hall was a nightmare of peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings. The floor was hardwood, or had been once, now warped and buckled from moisture damage. Dust coated every surface thick enough to write in, and the smell of mildew and rot filled the air. Sofia coughed, covering her nose with her hand. "It stinks, Daddy." "I know, baby. Breathe through your mouth." They moved through the first floor room by room. A living room with a collapsed ceiling in one corner, soggy drywall hanging down in sheets. A kitchen where the cabinets had rotted through, doors hanging at weird angles, countertops peeling away from waterlogged particle board. A dining room with wallpaper so faded the pattern was barely visible, curling away from the walls in long strips. The bathroom was horrifying. The toilet had cracked, water damage spreading across the floor. The tub was filled with debris that had fallen through holes in the ceiling. Black mold climbed the walls like something alive. Upstairs wasn't any better. 3 bedrooms, each one more damaged than the last. Holes in the floor where you could see down to the first story. Windows that had leaked for so long the frames were rotting. One bedroom's entire ceiling had collapsed, leaving a pile of soggy insulation and drywall on the floor. Patricia stood in what had probably been the master bedroom, her flashlight beam cutting through dust motes. "Mr. Rivera, I need you to hear me. This house is not salvageable for someone in your financial situation. The foundation alone would cost $20,000 to repair. That's before you even touch the electrical, plumbing, or structural issues. You'd be buying a teardown for $500, and then you'd need $50,000 to build something new. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Marcus understood perfectly. He was looking at an impossible situation, but impossible was all he could afford. What about the basement? The question came from somewhere desperate in his chest. "Can we see it?" "There's no basement listed on the property survey. I saw stairs through a doorway in the kitchen." Patricia frowned. "Show me." They went back downstairs, Marcus leading them to the kitchen. Behind a door he'd initially assumed was a pantry, narrow wooden stairs descended into darkness. Patricia shone her flashlight down, illuminating rough stone walls and packed dirt floor. "That's not a basement," she said slowly. "That's a root cellar. Old houses like this use them for storage before refrigeration. There's nothing down there worth seeing, trust me." But Sofia had already started down the stairs, her small feet careful on the wooden treads. "Sofia, wait." Marcus hurried after her, Patricia's protests following them both. The root cellar was larger than Marcus expected, maybe 15 feet by 20, with a ceiling low enough that Marcus had to duck. The air was cool and still, carrying that underground smell of earth and stone. His eyes adjusted to the dimness, catching shapes in the shadows. Old canning jars lined crude shelves, most of them broken or empty. Rusty tools hung from nails driven into the support beams. A workbench sat against one wall, covered in debris and dust. And the walls, every single wall was covered in wallpaper. Not just any wallpaper. The same pattern from upstairs, faded roses on a cream background. Except down here it was pristine, protected from the water damage and sunlight that had destroyed the upper floors. Someone had wallpapered a root cellar, which made absolutely no sense. Sofia touched one wall gently, her small fingers tracing the rose pattern. It's pretty down here, like a princess room underground. Sofia, don't touch anything. It's probably moldy. Marcus started to pull her back, then stopped. Where Sofia's hand had touched the wallpaper had shifted slightly, not peeling, but moving as if there was space behind it, as if it wasn't adhered directly to stone but to something else. Marcus reached out and pressed against the wallpaper near where Sofia had touched. It gave slightly, feeling wrong. Not like paper on plaster or stone, but like paper on wood or metal. Patricia had reached the bottom of the stairs, her flashlight beam swinging across the cellar. Find anything interesting? The walls feel weird. Marcus moved along the wallpaper, pressing different spots. Most felt like solid stone underneath, but there were sections, especially along the north wall, where it felt different. Hollow. Old houses have inconsistent construction, Patricia said, but her voice carried uncertainty. Could be the previous owner did some amateur repair work and wallpapered over it. Marcus found a corner where the wallpaper had lifted slightly, just a tiny gap between paper and whatever was underneath. He worked his fingers into the gap and pulled gently. The wallpaper came away in a long strip, surprisingly intact despite its age. Behind it was wood, not stone, not plaster, but smooth wooden paneling that had no business being in a root cellar. What the hell? Patricia moved closer, her flashlight illuminating the exposed wood. That's cedar paneling. That's not original to the house. Someone added this. Marcus kept pulling wallpaper, the strips coming away easier now. More cedar paneling emerged, running the full length of the north wall, floor to ceiling. And in the center, about 4 feet up from the ground, was a seam. A door. Jesus Christ. Patricia's voice had lost its professional calm. There's a room behind this wall. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. How do we open it? They searched the exposed paneling for a latch or handle, finding nothing obvious. Patricia ran her hand along the seam, while Marcus continued tearing away wallpaper, revealing more of the hidden door. It was about 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, like a small doorway or access panel. Sofia had wandered to the workbench, poking through the debris with a child's fearless curiosity. "Daddy, what's this?" She held up a small metal object, tarnished but recognizable. A key, old-fashioned and heavy, attached to a rusted chain. Marcus took it from her carefully. "Where did you find this, Mija?" "Under that cloth thing." Sofia pointed to a rag that had been draped over one corner of the workbench. Patricia examined the key under her flashlight beam. "That's an antique skeleton key, probably original to the house. But where's the lock?" They searched the exposed door panel again, this time looking specifically for a keyhole. Marcus found it almost by accident, his fingers catching on a small depression near the right edge of the door. Hidden behind a piece of loose paneling was a lock mechanism, old but intact. "Should we?" Marcus looked at Patricia, suddenly uncertain. "I mean, this is still technically county property until I buy it, right?" "Technically," Patricia said slowly. "But Mr. Rivera, I need you to understand something. If there's anything valuable behind this door, legally it belongs to whoever owns the property at the time of discovery, which currently is the county. If we open this now, before you've signed papers, anything inside belongs to them." Marcus felt cold spread through his chest. "So we should wait?" "I didn't say that." Patricia's professional mask had cracked completely, replaced by raw curiosity. "I said technically, but I'm the realtor assigned to this property. The county's never even sent an inspector. They just want it sold and off their books. If we find something, and you're planning to purchase anyway, who's to say when exactly it was discovered? It was wrong, probably illegal, definitely unethical." Marcus knew that, but he also knew that $1,700 was everything he had, that Sofia needed stability, that the system had ground him down for so long he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt hope about anything. "Open it," he said quietly. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. Marcus turned it, feeling old mechanisms engage with a series of clicks that echoed in the small space. The door resisted at first, swollen from decades of moisture, but when Marcus put his shoulder into it, the panel swung inward with a groan. Darkness yawned beyond the doorway. Patricia's flashlight beam cut through it, revealing a space about 8 feet deep and 12 feet wide. Not a room, a vault. Marcus felt his breath stop in his chest. The walls were lined with shelving, rough wood construction that had somehow survived the decades underground. And on those shelves, stacked in neat rows, catching the flashlight beam and throwing it back in warm, heavy gleams, were gold bars. Not just a few, not dozens, hundreds. Each bar was roughly the size of a brick, stamped with numbers and symbols Marcus couldn't immediately read in the dimness. There were stacked 20 bars to a shelf, and there were at least 12 shelves that Marcus could see. Patricia made a sound like she'd been punched. Holy Mary, Mother of God. Sofia tugged on Marcus's hand. Daddy, why are there so many yellow bricks? Like in the Wizard movie. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare at what had to be a hallucination, because gold bars didn't hide in root cellars and $500 houses in rural nowhere, didn't wait decades for a desperate father with $1,700 and a 5-year-old daughter to stumble across them. Patricia moved past him, her hands shaking as she reached for one of the bars. She lifted it carefully, grunting with the effort. Jesus, this is heavy. This is real. This is actual gold. She turned the bar over, examining the stamps. These markings, they're old. Really old. This isn't modern gold bullion. I think these might be from the 30s or 40s. Marcus finally found his voice. How much? How much gold are we looking at? Patricia pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the calculator app. Gold bars are typically 400 troy ounces. Current gold price is around $1,900 per troy ounce. So each bar would be worth, Jesus Christ, $760,000. She swept her flashlight across the shelves, counting under her breath. I'm seeing maybe 300 bars. Maybe more. If they're all this weight, if they're all real gold, we're looking at $228 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his knees go weak. He reached out to steady himself against the doorframe, his hand finding Sofia's shoulder instead, grounding himself in her small, real presence. That can't be right, he whispered. That's not possible. Count them yourself. Patricia's voice had gone hollow with shock. I'm just doing basic math here. Each bar, 760,000. 300 bars. Do the math. Marcus stepped into the vault on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. He moved along the shelves, touching the bars gently, half expecting them to vanish like smoke. But they were solid, heavy real. Some were stacked neatly. Others had toppled over, lying in small piles on the dirt floor. A few had cloth bags next to them, rotted through with age, suggesting someone had been in the process of moving them when they stopped. On the back wall, hanging from a nail, was a small leather notebook. Marcus pulled it down carefully, the cover cracked with age. Inside, written in faded ink, was a list. Bar hashtag 1-50. Transferred from estate liquidation. March 1932 bar hashtag 51-100. Purchased through intermediary. August 1933 bar hashtag 101-200. Direct acquisition. Multiple transactions. 1934 to 1937 bar hashtag 200-315. Final acquisition. December 1941. The handwriting was careful, meticulous, the work of someone documenting something important. Below the list was a single paragraph. If found, this gold was legally acquired during the Depression when the government offered to buy citizens' gold at fixed prices. I purchased from private sellers at slightly higher rates, stored here rather than selling to federal buyers. Not illegal at time of acquisition. Estate holders' insurance against currency collapse. To be distributed to heirs per will instructions. Below that, a signature. William Harrison Caldwell, 1941. Marcus showed the notebook to Patricia. She read it twice, her lips moving silently. If this is true, if this gold was acquired before the 1933 Gold Reserve Act fully took effect, and it's been in private storage ever since, it's not technically stolen or illegal. It's just forgotten. Who was William Harrison Caldwell? Marcus looked around the vault, seeing it differently now. Not a hiding place for stolen goods, but a time capsule. A Depression-era paranoia vault where someone had stored wealth they didn't trust the banks to protect. I have no idea, Patricia said. But whoever he was, he never came back for this. Or he died without telling anyone where it was. Or his heirs never found it. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide. And now you have. Sofia had followed them into the vault and was examining the gold bars with 5-year-old curiosity. Can I have one for show and tell? Marcus laughed, the sound coming out slightly hysterical. No, baby. We can't take these to school. Why not? Because they're worth more than everything in your entire school put together. Sofia considered this. Even the library? Even the library. Patricia was already on her phone, frantically typing. Okay. We need to think about this carefully. If you buy this property now, before anyone else knows about this vault, legally the contents become yours upon closing. But if word gets out before that happens, the county could claim the contents as part of the estate they seized. Or worse, federal authorities could get involved if there's any question about the legality of how this gold was acquired. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. So what do? We close this vault, put the wallpaper back as best we can, and we go back to my office right now and you sign purchase papers. I'll push it through as an emergency sale, cash offer, no contingencies. We can close in 48 hours if we move fast. I don't have cash for closing costs. I only have $1,700 total. Patricia grabbed his arm. Mr. Rivera, you're about to own $228 million in gold. I'll personally loan you the closing costs, and you can pay me back in, I don't know, gold bars or cash or whatever. But we need to lock this down legally before anyone else finds out. They worked quickly, replacing the wallpaper strips as best they could. They didn't fit perfectly, but from a distance, the wall looked untouched, just another section of faded roses on cream. Marcus locked the hidden door again and pocketed the key. Sofia helped Patricia arrange debris in front of the wallpapered section, making it look like the root cellar had been searched and dismissed. Upstairs, in the dying afternoon light, they stood in the ruined kitchen, catching their breath. Patricia looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed hope and fear in equal measure. Mr. Rivera, if you buy this house, if that gold is really yours, your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine. Are you ready for that? Marcus thought about the motel room. The debt collector calls Sofia's 2 small shoes. He thought about the social worker who'd suggested maybe he should consider giving his daughter to relatives who could provide better for her. He thought about every person who'd looked at him like he was failing, like he was worthless, like he didn't deserve what other people had. I've been ready my whole life, he said quietly. The paperwork took 3 hours. Patricia called in every favor she had, getting the county attorney to sign off on an emergency sale, expediting inspections that were meaningless for an as-is purchase, pushing through background checks and title searches at a speed that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Marcus signed his name so many times his hand cramped. He watched his checking account balance drop from $1,700 to $486 as closing costs and fees ate through his savings. Patricia covered the rest with a personal check, waving away his protests. You'll pay me back, she said simply. And Mr. Rivera, when this goes public, when people find out what you've discovered, I want you to remember that I helped you. That I could have gone to the county, could have tried to claim a finder's fee or delay the sale or any number of things. But I didn't. Remember that. There was something hungry in her eyes that made Marcus uneasy. But she was right. She could have stopped this, could have made it impossible. Instead, she'd helped him. I'll remember, he promised. They left the county clerk's office at 7 p.m. with a stamped deed in Marcus's name. He owned a falling-down house on 20 acres of scrubland. And underneath that house, in a vault hidden behind faded wallpaper, was enough gold to change his life forever, if he could keep it secret long enough to figure out what to do with it. The motel room felt smaller that night. Marcus lay in the saga bed with Sofia curled against his side, her breathing slow and even in sleep. His mind raced, running through scenarios and possibilities and dangers. The gold was his, legally his, as long as no one questioned its origins or challenged the sale. But $228 million didn't just appear without consequences. The IRS would want their cut. The county might try to reverse the sale if they found out. And Marcus was just a warehouse worker with $1,700, now $486, to his name. He needed help, professional help, someone who understood finances and law and how to handle sudden windfall without ending up in prison or dead. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Thinking about your situation. I know people who can help. Lawyers, financial advisors, security. People who handle these situations discreetly. Want me to make some calls? Marcus stared at the message for a long time. He didn't know Patricia Chen. Didn't know if he could trust her. But he also didn't know anyone else who'd believe him about the gold, let alone help him keep it. He typed back, "What's your fee for these introductions?" Her reply came instantly. 10% of whatever you get for the gold. Below market rate for finder's fee, but fair given I'm helping you keep 90% instead of losing it to the county. 10% of $228 million was $22.8 million. More money than Marcus had ever imagined Patricia Chen had, but still a fortune. And if she could legitimately help him keep the rest, it might be worth it. Deal, he typed, but everything in writing. Legal contracts. No handshake agreements. Smart man, Patricia replied. I'll have people at your hotel tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pack your things tonight. We're moving you somewhere secure. Marcus deleted the messages and turned off his phone. Beside him, Sofia stirred, mumbling something about yellow bricks and princesses in her sleep. He bought a $500 house and found $200 million. Now came the hard part, keeping it. The black SUV arrived at exactly 10 a.m. Marcus watched from the motel window as 3 people emerged. 2 men in dark suits and a woman in professional clothes carrying a briefcase. Patricia got out of a second vehicle, waving up at him with forced casualness. Marcus carried their 2 duffel bags down the exterior stairs, Sofia's hand clutched in his. The little girl stared at the SUV with wide eyes. Are we in trouble, Daddy? No, baby. We're getting help with something important. One of the men stepped forward, extending his hand. He was mid-40s, with graying temples and the kind of confidence that came from money or power or both. Mr. Rivera, I'm James Whitmore. I'm an attorney specializing in asset protection and estate planning. Patricia Chen called me yesterday about your unusual situation. Marcus shook his hand warily. How much does she know? Enough to know you need legal representation immediately. Everything you say to me is covered by attorney-client privilege. Shall we talk somewhere private? They drove to an office building 20 minutes outside of town. The interior was all polished wood and leather, the kind of place Marcus would never have entered in his normal life. A receptionist who looked like she stepped out of a magazine brought coffee in actual china cups, not styrofoam. Sofia sat in a waiting area with coloring books and toys that probably cost more than Marcus's weekly grocery budget. The adults gathered in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a view of absolutely nothing, just empty Texas scrubland stretching to the horizon. James Whitmore opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Marcus told the story. The impossible house, the root cellar, the vault behind the wallpaper. He showed them the key, the notebook from William Harrison Caldwell, photographs he'd secretly taken of the gold bars on his phone. The attorney studied everything in silence. The woman who'd arrived with him, introduced as Sarah Chen, a financial advisor and apparently Patricia's sister, ran calculations on a laptop. The second man, who hadn't been introduced, just stood by the door with his arms crossed, looking like security. Finally, James looked up. Okay, here's the situation. That gold is legally yours as contents of a property you legally purchased. The documentation for 1941 suggests it was legally acquired at the time, before federal restrictions became fully prohibitive. You have a legitimate claim. Marcus felt tension he hadn't realized he'd been holding release slightly. So I can keep it? You can keep it if we're very, very careful about how we handle this. The moment that gold enters the financial system, you'll trigger reporting requirements. The IRS will want to know where it came from. Banks will file suspicious activity reports. You could face federal scrutiny, audits, investigations. Even if everything is legal, the process could take years and cost millions in legal fees. What's the alternative? Sarah leaned forward. We liquidate the gold gradually through private sales. Collectors, foreign buyers, offshore accounts. Keep each transaction under reporting thresholds. Move the money through legitimate business structures that explain the income. Turn $200 million in gold into $100 million in usable cash over about 2 years. And the other $100 million? Taxes, fees, our commission, security costs. You'll end up with roughly $100 million that you can actually use without federal scrutiny. Maybe more if we're careful. Marcus looked at Patricia, who'd been quiet during this exchange. This is what you meant by help. This is how people with sudden wealth survive, she said simply. You can't just walk into a bank with gold bars and expect them to smile and hand you a check. You need infrastructure, legal protection, people who know how to navigate these systems. James pulled out a contract. Our fee is 25% of whatever we recover for you. In exchange, we provide full legal representation, financial structuring, security, and protection from any challenges to your claim. We take all the risk. If the federal government seizes the gold, we lose our commission. So we're motivated to make sure that doesn't happen. 25%. Marcus did the math quickly. $57 million to people he'd met an hour ago. That seems steep. It's industry standard for asset recovery, James said evenly. And Mr. Rivera, without us, you'll get 0%. The IRS will freeze everything the moment you try to move that gold. The county will challenge the sale. You'll spend everything you have on lawyers who bill $400 an hour, and 5 years from now, you'll still be fighting in court while that gold sits in federal evidence lockup. How do I know you won't just steal it? Because everything we do will be documented and legally binding. You'll have full transparency into every transaction. And because James's expression hardened slightly, we're very good at this, and we don't need to steal from clients when we make millions legitimately helping them. Sarah added, we've handled 7 similar cases in the last 3 years. Discovered art collections, hidden stock certificates, forgotten safe deposit boxes. We've never lost a client's assets to federal seizure. We're expensive, but we're worth it. Marcus looked at Patricia. You're in on this 25%. I get my 10% as agreed. The other 15 is split between James, Sarah, and operational costs. Security, transportation, temporary storage, administrative expenses. It's expensive to move $200 million in gold without anyone noticing. Everything in Marcus wanted to refuse. These people were circling him like sharks, carving up money that wasn't even his yet. But they were also right. He had no idea how to handle the situation. No connections, no expertise, no way to convert gold into cash without triggering every alarm in the federal financial system. I want everything in writing, Marcus said finally. Every fee, every transaction, every penny accounted for. And I want weekly reports. I need to know where my gold is and what you're doing with it at all times. James smiled. That's exactly what a smart client would ask for. We can do that. They spent the next 4 hours signing contracts. Marcus's hand cramped from writing his signature. Sofia fell asleep on the waiting room couch. Exhausted from the tension she didn't fully understand but could feel radiating from her father. By 4 p.m., Marcus Rivera had legal representation, financial advisors, and a plan to secretly liquidate $200 million in gold. He'd also committed to paying away $57 million of it. But he'd also ensured that Sofia would never wear 2 small shoes again, would never wonder where her next meal was coming from, would never feel the shame of being poor in a world that valued wealth above everything. That, Marcus decided, was worth any price. The extraction of the gold took 3 days and happened entirely at night. James's team arrived with a truck that looked like a commercial moving vehicle, complete with company logos that Patricia later told Marcus were completely fake. 8 men worked in shifts, loading gold bars into specially constructed crates designed to look like commercial cargo. Marcus stood in the root cellar and watched his fortune disappear into boxes. Each bar represented more money than he'd made in his entire life. Each crate held enough wealth to solve every problem he'd ever had. And he was trusting people he barely knew to transport it to a secure facility he'd never seen. Where does it go? He asked James, who was supervising the operation with military precision. Storage facility in Houston. Climate-controlled, 24-hour security, no questions asked. We have relationships with facilities that handle high-value assets for private collectors. Your gold will be logged, photographed, individually assessed for weight and purity, then stored until we begin liquidation. When does that start? 2 weeks. We need to establish your business infrastructure first. Set up an LLC. Create a consulting firm with legitimate-looking operations. Establish banking relationships that won't red flag sudden deposits. Then we start selling gold through private channels in tranches small enough not to trigger reports. Marcus watched another crate disappear up the root cellar stairs. How long until I see actual money? 3 months for the first distribution. $500,000 deposited into your business account as consulting income. Then monthly distributions increasing gradually. Within a year, you'll have access to around 20 million. Within 2 years, everything will be converted and distributed minus our fees and taxes. And if something goes wrong, if someone finds out, James looked at him directly, then we all go to prison for financial crimes. Which is why we're very, very careful. Everyone on my team has been vetted. Everyone has as much to lose as you do. This operation succeeds because it has to. Understood? Marcus nodded, trying to ignore the cold fear in his gut. He'd trusted these people with everything. If they betrayed him, he'd end up with nothing except federal charges. On the third night, the last crate was loaded. Marcus stood in the empty vault, his flashlight illuminating bare shelves and the depression in the dirt floor where 300 gold bars had rested for 80 years. The space looked smaller without the gold, somehow less magical. Sofia tugged on his hand. She'd insisted on being present for the final night, sensing this was important even if she didn't understand why. Daddy, where did all the yellow bricks go? They're going somewhere safe, Mija. Somewhere they'll turn into money, so we can have a real house. A real life. Will we still live in the witch house? Marcus laughed. No, baby. We'll find somewhere better. Somewhere that doesn't smell like mold and doesn't have holes in the floor. But I like the yellow bricks. They were pretty. I know. But pretty things are only useful if they can help us. And those bricks will help us more somewhere else. They locked the root cellar and left the property. James had already arranged for the house to be demolished, eliminating any evidence of the vault's existence. By morning, the entire structure would be rubble, the root cellar filled in and paved over. Marcus drove away from the $500 house and toward whatever came next. In his pocket was a receipt for 312 gold bars, signed by James Whitmore on behalf of Whitmore Asset Management. It was the only physical proof that any of this had happened. And Marcus had no idea if he'd just made the smartest decision of his life or the stupidest. The first distribution hit Marcus's new business bank account 3 months later, exactly as promised. He was working his warehouse shift, unloading pallets in the heat, when his phone buzzed with an alert. Deposit, $500,000 account balance, $500,486.23. Marcus stared at the screen until the numbers started to blur. $500,000. More money than his parents had made in their entire lives combined. More money than he'd ever imagined having. And according to James, this was just the beginning. He finished his shift on autopilot, his mind spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. That night, after putting Sofia to bed in their new rental house, a legitimate 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood with appliances that worked and a landlord who didn't look at him like he was garbage, Marcus called James. I got the deposit. Good. That's the first tranche. Your LLC is now officially a consulting firm that just landed its first major client. You've invoiced for business advisory services, payment received, and documented. Everything looks legitimate on paper. When's the next one? 2 weeks. Same amount. Then we'll start increasing the distributions. But Marcus, you need to be smart about this. Don't quit your job yet. Don't buy expensive things. Don't tell anyone about the money. As far as the world is concerned, your consulting business is slowly building up clients. You live modestly while building capital. Understood. Marcus looked around his rental house. Modest was a luxury compared to the motel. How long do I have to pretend to be poor? until we've liquidated at least 50% of the gold and established a pattern of income that explains your wealth. Another 18 months minimum. Can you do that? 18 months of working double shifts while $500,000 sat in his bank account. 18 months of watching Sofia play with dollar store toys while millions of dollars in gold converted to cash. 18 months of pretending his life hadn't changed when everything had changed. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. I can do that. The lie came easier than he expected. The second distribution came exactly on schedule. Then the third. By month 6, Marcus had $3 million across several business accounts, all documented as legitimate consulting income for various clients James had created. The paper trail was perfect. The tax filings were immaculate. On paper, Marcus Rivera was a moderately successful business consultant with growing revenues. In reality, he was a warehouse worker with a 17-year-old truck and a daughter who still shopped at Goodwill because Daddy said they needed to be careful with money even though they had more of it now. The strain of pretending started to show. Marcus's co-workers noticed he wasn't as desperate for overtime. His landlord noticed rent was never late anymore. Sofia's kindergarten teacher noticed her lunchbox had better food in it, actual fruit instead of crackers, real juice instead of water in a reused bottle. You come into some money, his supervisor asked casually during a break. You seem different lately. Less stressed. Marcus shrugged. Just budgeting better. Cut some expenses, picked up some freelance consulting work on weekends. What kind of consulting? Business optimization. Supply chain stuff. Boring but pays okay. The lie had become practiced smooth. Marcus could recite his cover story without thinking. Could produce invoices and client contracts if anyone asked. James's team had made sure the entire infrastructure was airtight. But inside, Marcus was screaming. He wanted to quit his job, wanted to take Sofia on a real vacation, wanted to stop pretending to be poor when he had millions of dollars accumulating in accounts he could barely bring himself to check because the numbers felt surreal. 18 months, he whispered to himself at night. Just 18 more months. Then it's real. The crisis came at month 9. Marcus was at work when James called, his voice tight with stress Marcus had never heard before. We have a problem. The IRS flagged one of your business accounts for audit. Marcus felt his blood go cold. What does that mean? It means they're reviewing your income documentation for the last 9 months. They want to verify your consulting clients are real, that the services you're billing for actually happened. We anticipated this might happen, which is why we built such extensive documentation, but we need you to be prepared for questions. What kind of questions? Describe the services you provided. Who authorized the payments? Why a warehouse worker suddenly has consulting contracts worth millions? We have answers prepared, but you need to be able to deliver them confidently. Can you come to Houston tomorrow? We'll run you through mock interviews. Marcus got permission for a personal day, the first he'd taken since starting the job. He drove to Houston in his beat-up truck, trying to calm the panic rising in his chest. After everything they'd done, all the careful planning, was it going to fall apart because some IRS agent decided to ask questions? James's office was tense when Marcus arrived. Sarah was there, along with 2 lawyers Marcus hadn't met before. They'd set up a conference room like an interrogation space, with Marcus sitting across from people playing federal agents. For 6 hours, they drilled him. Explain your business model. Describe your client base. Walk us through this invoice. What specific services did you provide on these dates? Why would a manufacturing company pay you $50,000 for 3 days of consulting? Marcus stumbled at first. The cover story felt flimsy when questioned directly, but the lawyers coached him, sharpening his responses until they sounded natural. By the end of the day, Marcus could describe his fake consulting work in such detail, he almost believed it himself. The key is confidence, James said afterward. You're not lying. You're a consultant. You provided value. Your clients paid you for that value. The fact that the underlying capital came from gold is irrelevant. The business structure is real. The taxes are paid. The IRS has nothing to challenge except the source of your initial capital, and that's protected by the property purchase. What if they dig deeper? What if they find the gold? The gold no longer exists. The property has been demolished. The vault was filled in. There's no physical evidence of where your capital originated. And legally, it doesn't matter. You own that property. Contents of the property belong to you. Converting those contents into cash is perfectly legal. The IRS can audit you all they want. They'll find a legitimate consulting business with real income and proper tax filings. Marcus wanted to believe him. But that night, lying in his rental house bed, he couldn't stop imagining federal agents kicking down his door, dragging him away in handcuffs while Sofia screamed. The audit took 4 months and ultimately concluded with no findings. Marcus's business was deemed legitimate, if unusual. The IRS accepted his documentation and closed their file. James called with the news on a Tuesday morning, his voice carrying audible relief. "You're clear. They're done. We can proceed with full liquidation now." Marcus sat in his truck in the warehouse parking lot and let himself feel it. Relief, terror, exhaustion, triumph. He'd been carrying so much fear for so long that its absence felt like floating. "How much longer?" he asked. 6 more months. We'll accelerate distributions now that the IRS has cleared you. By month 15, you'll have access to the full amount, minus our fees. $75 million in liquid cash, spread across accounts and investments. Enough to change your life forever. Enough to stop pretending. Enough to stop pretending. James agreed. The demolition of Marcus's old life happened slowly and then all at once. At month 13, he quit his warehouse job, citing his consulting business requiring full-time attention. His co-workers threw him a small party. His supervisor made a joke about how far Marcus had come from desperate guy who needed every hour of overtime. "Just got lucky with some clients," Marcus said, accepting a sheet cake with "good luck" written in green icing. Right place, right time. At month 14, he moved out of the rental and bought a house. Nothing ostentatious, 3-bedroom ranch style in a good school district, but a real house with a yard where Sofia could play. His neighbors were friendly, assuming he was in tech or something similarly boring and lucrative. At month 15, the final distribution landed. Marcus sat in his home office, which still felt too nice to be real, and watched his account balances update. $76 million across various accounts. Not the full $228 million from the vault, but enough. More than enough. He'd paid James's team $57 million. Taxes had taken another $40 million. Security, storage, transportation, and operational costs had consumed another $8 million. Bribes, Marcus thought, though James called them facilitation fees. But $76 million was still $76 million. It was generational wealth. It was never having to worry about money again. It was Sofia's entire education paid for, plus medical care, plus a trust fund that would support her children and grandchildren. It was everything Marcus had never had, and everything Sofia would always have. James called that afternoon. "Congratulations, Mr. Rivera. You're officially wealthy. How does it feel?" Marcus looked at Sofia, playing in the backyard, building something elaborate out of sticks and imagination. "Terrifying. That's normal. Most people who come into sudden wealth struggle with it. The key is having a plan. Sarah's already prepared investment strategies for you. Diversified portfolios, real estate holdings, trust structures for Sofia's future. You'll never have to work again if you don't want to. The interest alone will generate more than you could spend. What about you? Your team? What happens now? We part ways professionally. You'll have access to Sarah for investment questions, and I'm always available for legal counsel. But our contractual relationship is complete. The gold is gone. The money is yours. Our work is done." There was something final in his voice. Marcus realized he'd probably never see James Whitmore again. This man who'd turned his life upside down, who'd helped him keep millions of dollars, who'd been the architect of everything good and terrifying in Marcus's life for the past 15 months, was just going to disappear. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. "I know we paid you, but thank you. For everything. You're welcome. And Marcus, be smart with this. Don't let the money destroy you. I've seen it happen. People get wealthy and lose themselves. Don't be one of them." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his home office and felt the weight of $76 million settle across his shoulders. It wasn't gold bars in a vault anymore. It was numbers and accounts, investments and markets, real estate deeds, trust documents. It was real and legal in his. And he had no idea if he was prepared for what came next. The family found out 6 months later. Marcus had been careful, very careful, but money leaves traces. A cousin saw his new house. Another relative noticed Sofia's private school uniform. His sister Maria cornered him at a family gathering and demanded to know what was going on. You're living in a $400,000 house. Sofia's school costs $30,000 a year. You quit your job and don't seem worried about it. Marcus, what the hell happened? He prepared for this conversation, practiced variations of it with therapists and financial advisors. But sitting across from Maria, seeing genuine concern mixed with suspicion, Marcus realized how badly he didn't want to lie to her. I got lucky, he said carefully. Bought a property that turned out to be worth more than I paid. Sold it, invested the profit, did well. The consulting business is real. I got lucky. How lucky? Lucky enough that Sofia and I are set. That I can help family if they need it. That we don't have to struggle anymore. Maria studied him for a long moment. You bought that $500 house, didn't you? The one everyone said was condemned. I heard you closed on it and then demolished it immediately. Why would you do that unless there was something valuable there? Marcus felt his stomach drop. Maria, it's okay. I'm not asking you to tell me everything. I'm just saying people are talking. The family's talking. They're saying Marcus found something in that house. They're saying that's why you suddenly have money. And they're waiting to see if you'll share. The word share landed like a bomb. Marcus thought about his cousins, his uncles, his extended family scattered across Texas. All of them struggling in various ways. All of them seeing his sudden wealth and wondering why they didn't get a piece. I don't owe anyone anything, he said quietly. I bought that property legally. Whatever I found was mine. I paid taxes on it. I followed the rules. What I do with my money is my business. That's going to make you real popular at family gatherings. Then maybe I won't come to family gatherings anymore. Maria looked sad. This is going to change everything, you know? Your relationships, how people see you, how they treat you. Money does that. Changes people. I didn't change. I'm still me. I'm just not broke anymore. You changed the minute you opened that vault, little brother, whether you realize it or not. She left him sitting alone at the family gathering, surrounded by relatives who now looked at him differently. Not with warmth, with calculation. Measuring what he had against what they wanted. Weighing whether the relationship was worth maintaining if Marcus wasn't going to share his fortune. That night, driving home with Sofia asleep in the back seat, Marcus realized Maria was right. Everything had changed. He'd gone from the struggling single dad, everyone pitted, to the rich relative everyone resented. And there was no going back. The press coverage started small. A local news story about the mysterious demolition of a historic property. A blogger investigating Depression-era gold hoards, asking questions about recent real estate transactions in the county. A financial magazine running a piece on sudden wealth and how ordinary people sometimes stumbled into fortunes. Marcus's name wasn't mentioned initially, but enough details leaked that anyone paying attention could connect the dots. The $500 house. The immediate demolition. The struggling single father who suddenly quit his job and bought a nice house. People weren't stupid. The reporter started showing up at month 18, knocking on Marcus's door, calling his phone, approaching Sofia's school. They wanted the story. How much gold? Where exactly? How did he find it? What did it feel like to go from poverty to wealth overnight? Marcus hired security. Nothing excessive. Just a firm that handled protective services for wealthy clients. They taught him how to identify surveillance, how to vary his routines, how to protect Sofia from people who might target her. The threats had started coming, emails and messages from people claiming he owed them, people who thought they had better claims to the gold, people who just wanted money and saw Marcus as an easy target. This is normal, his security consultant said. High-profile wealth attracts attention. Some of it's benign, some isn't. We'll keep you safe. Normal. Marcus wanted to laugh. Nothing about his life was normal anymore. He couldn't go to the grocery store without people recognizing him. Couldn't take Sofia to the park without worrying about photographers or opportunists. Couldn't have normal relationships because everyone wanted something. Even dating was impossible. The women who approached him now weren't interested in Marcus Rivera, warehouse worker and single father. They were interested in Marcus Rivera, millionaire with a mysterious fortune. They saw dollar signs, not a person. "Is this what you wanted?" his therapist asked during one session. "Is this the life you imagined when you opened that vault?" Marcus thought about it carefully. "I wanted stability, security for Sofia, a chance to not be terrified about rent or food or whether I was failing as a father. I got all of that, but I also got complications I never imagined." "Do you regret it?" "No. Even with everything, I don't regret it. Sofia has opportunities one never had. She'll go to college without debt. She'll have choices I never had. That's worth the complications. What about you? What do you have?" Marcus looked at his hands. Soft now, not rough from warehouse work. Manicured, because someone had suggested it looked more professional. He barely recognized them as his own. "I have a knowledge that I did something impossible. That I took a chance everyone said was stupid and turned it into a fortune. I have proof that sometimes, against all odds, the desperate guy wins. I have that. Is it enough? It has to be." The philanthropy started at year 2. Marcus established the Rivera Foundation with a $50 million endowment. Its mission was simple: help struggling single parents get back on their feet. Emergency housing assistance, job training, childcare support, legal aid. Everything Marcus had needed when he was living in that motel, everything society hadn't provided, the foundation offered. He hired staff, established partnerships with social services, launched programs in 3 cities. Within 6 months, they were helping 200 families. Within a year, 1,000. The press loved it. Local hero uses fortune to help others. Former warehouse worker pays it forward. Marcus Rivera, the struggling single father who found millions and decided to share it with people who needed help most. The cynics said he was just trying to improve his public image. The cynics were probably right. But the families getting help didn't care about his motivations. They just cared that someone finally saw them, finally valued their struggles enough to offer real assistance. Marcus attended foundation events, shaking hands with donors and politicians and nonprofit leaders. He smiled for cameras and gave interviews about the importance of supporting vulnerable families. He played the role of philanthropic millionaire because that was safer than being the guy who found gold and kept it all for himself. But privately, late at night when Sofia was asleep and the house was silent, Marcus wondered if any of it mattered. He'd helped 1,000 families. There were millions more still struggling. He had $26 million left after the foundation endowment. He could give it all away and barely make a dent in the problem. "You can't save everyone," Sarah told him during one of their investment check-ins. "You can only do what's within your capacity." 1,000 families is significant. About 1,000 children who might have stable childhoods now. 1,000 parents who don't have to choose between rent and food. That matters. Does it balance out? Marcus asked. "Taking $200 million for myself and giving $50 million away? Is that moral? Is that fair? You legally own that gold. You could have kept all of it. The fact that you're giving anything away puts you ahead of 99% of wealthy people. Stop torturing yourself with questions that don't have answers." But Marcus couldn't stop, because at the core of everything was a simple truth. He'd gotten lucky. Found something someone else had hidden 80 years ago. He hadn't earned the gold through work or skill or anything except being desperate enough to buy a $500 house nobody else wanted. And now he had generational wealth, while people he'd worked beside at the warehouse were still struggling, still one medical emergency or car breakdown away from disaster. Where was their vault? Where was their lucky break? The answer, Marcus knew, was nowhere. Most people didn't get lucky breaks. They just ground through life, hoping to survive. And his foundation, generous as it was, couldn't change that fundamental unfairness. All he could do was help where he could and live with the guilt of having more than he needed while others had less than they deserved. Sofia turned 7 and asked a question that stopped Marcus cold. They were sitting at dinner in their nice house with food from the expensive grocery store where they never worried about prices. "Daddy, why do we have so much money when my friend Emma's family doesn't?" Marcus set down his fork. "What do you mean, baby?" Emma said her mom works 3 jobs, and they still can't pay rent sometimes. But you don't work at all anymore, and we have this big house. Why is that fair? 7 years old and already grappling with inequality. Marcus felt pride and sadness in equal measure. His daughter was seeing the world clearly, seeing the injustice of wealth distribution, seeing that luck and circumstance mattered more than effort. "It's not fair," he said quietly. "We got lucky, Mija. I found something valuable and sold it. But Emma's mom is working just as hard as I used to work. Maybe harder. She just hasn't gotten lucky yet. Can we give her our money? We help families like Emma's through our foundation. Remember the charity we started? We've helped lots of families pay rent and buy food. But not Emma's family specifically." Marcus realized he didn't know if Emma's family had applied for foundation assistance. He distanced himself from the operational details, letting the staff handle applications and distributions. It had seemed more professional that way. "I don't know, baby, but I can find out. If Emma's family needs help, we'll make sure they get it." Sofia nodded, satisfied with that answer. But Marcus sat with the question long after dinner was over. His daughter had seen through all his rationalizations in one simple question. Why do we have so much when others have so little? There was no good answer except luck and broken systems and the brutal randomness of who gets opportunities and who doesn't. The lawsuit came at year 3. A man named Gerald Caldwell claimed to be the great-grandson of William Harrison Caldwell, the man who'd originally hidden the gold. He filed suit claiming the gold had been stolen from his family, that Marcus's purchase of the property didn't transfer ownership of items that were illegally concealed. James Whitmore came out of semi-retirement to handle the case. They met in the same Houston office where Marcus had first signed away 25% of his fortune. "This is going to be expensive," James said bluntly. Gerald has hired excellent attorneys. They're arguing that the gold was hidden to avoid Depression-era federal seizure requirements, which made it illegal contraband. If they can prove that, the court could rule that you never had legal ownership, which means everything you've done with that money could be reversed. Marcus felt sick. Can they win? Maybe. The legal precedent is murky. Courts have ruled both ways on discovered assets, depending on circumstances. We have the advantage of possession and the property purchase, but they have blood relation to the original owner and potentially the argument that the gold was illegally concealed. What happens if we lose? You return whatever assets remain. The court will try to claw back distributed funds. Your foundation's endowment could be seized. Your house, your investments, Sofia's trust fund, all of it becomes subject to judgment. You could end up owing more than you have, essentially bankrupt. After everything, I could lose it all. James leaned forward. Yes, but we're going to fight like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Experts testified about Depression-era gold regulations. Historians debated William Harrison Caldwell's intentions. Lawyers argued about property law and inheritance rights and what constituted a legal concealment versus private storage. Marcus sat through every day of it, watching lawyers dissect the luckiest moment of his life into legal arguments and precedent citations. Sofia stayed with Marcus's sister, shielded from the media circus that surrounded the courthouse. Gerald Caldwell testified, claiming his great-grandfather had been a paranoid man who'd hidden assets from an overreaching government, that the gold represented wealth his family had been deprived of for 3 generations, that Marcus had stumbled into something that was never his to take. Marcus testified about finding the vault, about buying the property legally, about following every rule he'd understood at the time, about being a desperate father who'd taken a chance on an impossible house and found something that changed his life. The jury deliberated for 4 days. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. The foreman stood and read from a piece of paper in a voice that carried through the packed courtroom. "We find in favor of the defendant, Marcus Rivera. The gold was legally acquired through legitimate purchase of property and its contents. The plaintiff has not proven that the original concealment was illegal under applicable law. Judgment for the defendant." Marcus felt his legs go weak. James grabbed his arm, keeping him upright. Around them, the courtroom erupted in noise, reporters shouting questions, Gerald Caldwell's attorneys protesting, Sofia's excited voice calling for Daddy for where Maria was holding her in the gallery. He'd won. The gold was his legally and definitively. No more questions, no more challenges. The court had ruled. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded him. Marcus had prepared a statement, rehearsed it with PR consultants who'd coach him on tone and delivery. I'm grateful for the court's decision. I've always believed I acted legally and ethically in this matter. I look forward to continuing my work with the Rivera Foundation, helping families in need. Thank you. Short, professional, giving them nothing they could use against him. He learned that lesson the hard way over 3 years. That night, alone in his home office after Sofia was asleep, Marcus pulled out the old key from the root cellar. He'd kept it as a memento, a reminder of where everything had started. He thought about that desperate morning 3 years ago, signing papers for a $500 house everyone said was worthless. About Patricia Chen's warning that he was buying a money pit. About tearing down wallpaper in a root cellar and finding a vault that changed everything. What would have happened if he'd listened to the warnings? If he'd walked away, found a rental somewhere, continued grinding through poverty? Sofia would still be wearing 2 small shoes. Marcus would still be working double shifts and calling that living. But he also wouldn't have spent 3 years looking over his shoulder. Wouldn't have dealt with lawsuits and security threats and family members who looked at him like a walking ATM. Wouldn't have lost the simple ability to exist in the world without people calculating his net worth. Was it worth it? He whispered to the empty office. The answer was yes and no and maybe, and it didn't matter because he couldn't go back. The key caught the lamplight, brass gleaming. A small object that had opened a door to everything Marcus had now. His fortune, his foundation, his complicated new life where money solved old problems but created new ones. He locked the key in his desk drawer and went to check on Sofia. She slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even, her room full of things Marcus had never been able to give her before. Security, comfort, opportunity. That, he decided, was answer enough. The foundation gala happened at year 5. Marcus had resisted the idea initially, uncomfortable with the ostentatious display of wealth required for high-end fundraising. But Sarah had convinced him that major donors expected spectacle, that the foundation could raise millions in a single night if they did it right. The event was held at a hotel that cost more for one night than Marcus used to make in a month. Women wore dresses that cost thousands. Men wore watches that cost more than cars. Everyone smiled and sipped champagne and congratulated Marcus on his success like they'd always known he'd end up here. Sofia attended as his guest, now 10 years old and poised in a way that made Marcus simultaneously proud and sad. His daughter moved through the crowd with confidence, shaking hands and making small talk like she'd been born to it. When had she stopped being the scared 5-year-old in 2 small shoes? Mr. Rivera, your foundation has done remarkable work. A woman in a silver dress approached, her smile professional. I'm Jennifer Harrison. My firm would like to discuss a potential partnership. Marcus shook her hand, going through the motions of conversation he'd perfected over 5 years. What had once felt fake now came naturally. He could talk about community impact and sustainable philanthropy and strategic giving like he'd always understood these concepts. Our focus is single-parent families facing housing instability, he explained. We found that short-term rent assistance combined with job training creates better long-term outcomes than either intervention alone. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. That aligns perfectly with our corporate giving priorities. I'd love to schedule a meeting to discuss how we might collaborate. They exchanged business cards. Marcus added her to the mental list of follow-up conversations his assistant would schedule. The social choreography of wealth had become second nature. But later, standing on the hotel balcony looking out at the city lights, Marcus felt the disconnect. 5 years ago, he'd been eating gas station sandwiches and counting pennies. Now he was at a gala where people casually discussed million-dollar donations. You okay, Daddy? Sofia appeared beside him, holding a virgin mocktail the bartender had made special for her. Yeah, baby. Just thinking. About the vault? Marcus looked at his daughter in surprise. They rarely talked about the vault, about how their fortune had started. It had become an understood thing, referenced obliquely but never discussed directly. How did you know? Sofia shrugged. You always get this look when you're at these events. Like you're remembering something sad. I figure it was about when we were poor. About how weird it is that we're not anymore. 10 years old and reading imperfectly. It is weird. I was your age when my parents were struggling with money. I remember what that felt like. And now here you are in a fancy dress at a charity gala. And I wonder if you'll ever really understand what it means to not have enough. Is that bad? That I won't understand? I don't know. It's different. You'll have opportunities one never had. You'll make choices based on what you want to do, not what you need to do to survive. That's good. That's what I wanted for you. But there's something about struggle that teaches you things comfort never can. Sofia was quiet for a moment. Emma's family got help from our foundation. Did you know that? Her mom got job training, and they paid her rent for 6 months while she got certified as a medical assistant. Emma told me they have their own apartment now. A real one, where they feel safe. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I didn't know that. She said your foundation saved them. That's worth something, right? Even if we're rich and it's weird. Yeah, baby. That's worth something. They stood together on the balcony, father and daughter, separated by wealth and the life they'd once lived, but connected by the memory of what struggle felt like. Inside, the gala continued, people raising paddles to bid on auction items and write checks that would fund another year of operations. Marcus thought about Gerald Caldwell, who'd sued claiming the gold was his by blood. About Patricia Chen, who'd taken her 10% and disappeared into comfortable retirement. About James Whitmore and his team, who'd extracted their 25% and moved on to the next client. Everyone had gotten their piece. And what remained was Marcus's to use as he saw fit. The court had ruled. The money was his. But standing on that balcony with Sofia, Marcus finally understood what his therapist had been trying to tell him for 5 years. The money had never really been the point. The point was what you built with it, how you used it to make the world marginally less terrible for someone else struggling in the dark. Come on, he said, putting his arm around Sofia's shoulders. Let's go back inside. I think I want to match whatever the auction raises tonight. Double the foundation's haul. What do you think? Sofia grinned. I think Emma's mom would say that's a good use of yellow bricks. They went back into the gala together, ready to write another check, host another conversation, play another round of the game Marcus had learned to play. Not perfectly, not always comfortably, but well enough to make a difference. And sometimes Marcus had learned that was enough. The anniversary of finding the vault came and went without fanfare. Marcus didn't mark the date publicly, didn't draw attention to it. But privately, he drove back to the property where the $500 house had stood. The lot was empty now, paved over for a strip mall parking lot. Nobody walking past would ever know that underneath the asphalt, hidden and filled in earth, was a root cellar where 300 gold bars had waited for 80 years to change someone's life. Marcus stood in the parking lot as shoppers walked past, completely unaware of the history beneath their feet. A young mother struggled with a stroller and shopping bags, her face tight with the stress Marcus recognized instantly. That had been him 5 years ago. That was still millions of people every day. He wanted to walk up to her, hand her a check, tell her it would be okay. But he'd learned that didn't work. Random acts of generosity felt good, but didn't create systemic change. The foundation's approach, structured assistance combined with skill building, had better long-term outcomes. Still, the impulse remained. To fix individual suffering when he encountered it, to use his impossible fortune to make someone's impossible situation possible. His phone rang. Sarah Chun, checking in about quarterly investment returns. Marcus let it go to voicemail. The money would still be there when he called back. It always was now, accumulating faster than he could spend it, generating wealth that felt increasingly abstract. He thought about the notebook William Harrison Caldwell had left in the vault. Estate holder's insurance against currency collapse. The man had stored gold for 80 years, never touching it, leaving it for heirs who never came. Marcus had found it instead, had used it, had built something with it, both for himself and for others. That felt right in a way hoarding it forever never would. Thank you, he whispered to the empty parking lot, to the ghost of William Harrison Caldwell, to the luck that had put him in the right place at the right moment. I hope I'm doing right by what you left. No answer came, just the sound of traffic and shoppers and normal life flowing around him. Marcus climbed back into his truck. Now, a new model, but still a truck because some things about himself he didn't want to change, and drove back to his life. A life built on yellow bricks and wallpaper and a $500 house nobody else had wanted. A life that had started with desperation and ended with purpose. Not a perfect life, not an uncomplicated one, but his. And that, Marcus had finally learned, was enough. 10 years after finding the vault, Marcus Rivera stood in front of a crowd of 200 people at the Rivera Foundation's annual benefit dinner. Sofia sat in the front row, now 15 years old and applying to colleges that would have been financially impossible in another life. When I found that gold, Marcus said, his voice carrying through the hotel ballroom, I thought it would solve all my problems. In some ways it did. I never had to worry about rent again. My daughter got opportunities one never dreamed of. We built this foundation that's now helped over 10,000 families. He paused, looking out at the faces of donors and staff and families the foundation had assisted. But money doesn't solve everything. It gives you tools, resources, options. What you do with those tools is what matters. And what we've chosen to do is remember what it felt like to struggle, to be invisible to systems that should have helped us, to face impossible choices with no good options. Every family this foundation assists is a family that deserves the same kind of luck I had. The difference is we're not waiting for them to find hidden gold. We're creating opportunities, providing support, investing in their potential before they hit rock bottom. That's the real treasure. Not what I found in that vault, but what we're building together every day. The crowd applauded. Marcus stepped down from the podium and accepted handshakes and congratulations. But his attention was on Sofia, who was wiping tears from her eyes. That was really good, Dad. You think so? Yeah. You finally sounded like you meant it. Like you're not apologizing for having money anymore. Marcus hugged his daughter. It took me a while to figure out that being lucky doesn't mean being guilty. As long as we use what we have to help others, we're okay. We're more than okay, Dad. We're making a difference. They stood together as the event continued around them. Father and daughter who'd started in a motel room with nothing and built something that mattered. Not because they were special or deserving, but because they'd had a chance and refused to waste it. The gold was long gone, converted to cash and investments and the foundation's endowment. But its legacy remained in every family housed, every parent employed, every child who got opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. Marcus thought about the woman in the root seller's notebook, William Harrison Caldwell's careful documentation of how he'd acquired each bar. The man had been preparing for disaster that never came, hoarding wealth he never used. But in doing so, he'd created an opportunity for someone else 80 years later. Had given Marcus Rivera the chance to transform struggle into success. Maybe that was the real lesson. Wealth wasn't meant to be hoarded or hidden. It was meant to flow, to create opportunities, to lift people up. Marcus had been lifted up by luck and a $500 house. Now he was using that lift to pull others up behind him. It wasn't perfect. The foundation couldn't help everyone. Thousands still fell through cracks, still struggled, still faced the same impossible choices Marcus had faced. But 10,000 families was better than zero. Every person helped was a life changed, a trajectory altered, a chance given. Come on, Sofia said, tugging his arm. They're about to announce this year's fund-raising total. I want to see your face when you hear the number. They returned to the front of the room as the foundation's director took the microphone. Thanks to tonight's donors and our matching pledge from the Rivera family, we raised $4.2 million. That will fund another year of operations and let us expand into 2 new cities. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus smiled, but his mind was already working through logistics. 2 new cities meant new staff, new partnerships, new families to reach. The work never stopped. The need never stopped, but neither did his commitment to meeting it. As the event wound down and guests filtered out, Marcus found himself alone in the empty ballroom. Staff were breaking down tables and clearing dishes, returning the space to neutrality. In a few hours, another event would happen here, another group of people gathering for another purpose. But for now, it was just Marcus and the memory of a root cellar and a vault and 300 gold bars that had changed everything. "Thank you," he whispered again, to luck or fate or William Harrison Caldwell or whatever force had put him in that $500 house at exactly the right moment. "I hope I did right by it." And then you want to find Sofia, ready to go home to the life they'd built from yellow bricks and hope. The years continued to roll forward, and Marcus found himself navigating waters he'd never imagined. By year 12, the foundation had expanded to 15 cities across 3 states. The original $50 million endowment had grown through careful investment and additional donations to nearly $85 million. They were now helping over 25,000 families annually. But with growth came complexity. Board meetings that used to take an hour now consumed entire days. Staff had ballooned from 5 employees to over 200. Marcus had hired a CEO to handle daily operations, a former nonprofit executive named Rebecca Torres who understood the work better than he ever could. "You need to let go," Rebecca told him during one particularly contentious board meeting. "You're micromanaging decisions that staff should be making. Trust the people you hired." Marcus knew she was right, but letting go meant accepting that the foundation was no longer his personal mission. It had become an institution, something that would outlive him, something that operated according to systems and protocols rather than his individual vision. "What if they make decisions I disagree with?" he asked. "Then they make them. That's what institutional sustainability means. Your vision created this, but it can't depend on you forever. What happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? Does everything collapse?" The question haunted Marcus for weeks. He'd built the foundation as a way to process his guilt about the fortune, to justify keeping $76 million while giving $50 million away. But Rebecca was asking him to consider something bigger, creating something that would continue helping families long after he was gone. He started transitioning responsibilities, gave Rebecca full authority over operational decisions, let the board vote on strategic direction without his input carrying extra weight, stepped back from the day-to-day work that had consumed him for over a decade. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Sofia graduated high school at 17, a year early because she'd tested out of several required courses. She'd been accepted to Stanford, MIT, and Harvard. The letters sat on Marcus's desk, each one representing an opportunity that would have been impossible in another life. "Which one do you want?" Marcus asked as they sat together reviewing financial aid packages that didn't matter because money was no longer an obstacle. "I don't know," Sofia said quietly. "They're all amazing. They're all so far from anything I ever thought I could have. You earned this, Mija. Your grades, your test scores, your essays. This isn't about the money. This is about you." Sofia looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for 17. "Dad, I was 5 years old living in a motel. I wore shoes that hurt my feet because we couldn't afford new ones. I remember being hungry. I remember you working 3 jobs and still not having enough. And now I'm choosing between Stanford and Harvard like it's normal. How is that not about money?" Marcus didn't have a good answer. She was right. The opportunities in front of her existed because of gold bars hidden in a root cellar, not because the universe rewarded hard work. Sofia had worked hard, but so had thousands of other kids who'd never get these choices. "So what do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want to study social policy. I want to understand why some families get lucky and others don't. Why systems fail people like we used to be. And I want to fix it." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. His daughter had grown up watching him wrestle with the implications of sudden wealth. She'd absorbed the lessons he'd been trying to teach himself, that having money meant having responsibility, that luck demanded purpose. "Stanford has the best public policy program," he said quietly. "I know. That's where I want to go." They sat in comfortable silence, father and daughter who'd traveled an impossible distance together. From a motel room to college acceptance letters. From desperation to opportunity. From survival to purpose. "Your mother would be proud," Marcus said, referencing Sofia's mother who died when Sofia was 2. Cancer that had eaten through their meager savings and left Marcus alone with a toddler and medical debt that took years to escape. I wish she could have seen this. Seen us like this. Me too, baby. Me too. The scandal broke in year 13. An investigative journalist named David Chen, no relation to Patricia, published a long-form piece about the gold vault discovery. He'd spent 18 months tracking down every detail, interviewing everyone involved, piecing together the full story that Marcus had tried to keep private. The article was titled The $240 Million Question. When Luck Becomes Fortune, Who Decides What's Fair? It laid out everything. The $500 house purchase, the vault behind the wallpaper, the exact quantity of gold bars, the team Marcus had hired to liquidate them quietly, the fees paid to lawyers and advisors, the foundation's creation as what David called conscience laundering. But the most damaging part was the interviews with families who claimed William Harrison Caldwell had swindled their ancestors during the Depression. 3 different families came forward with stories of how Caldwell had bought gold from desperate people at predatory prices, taking advantage of economic collapse to build his hidden fortune. Marcus Rivera didn't just find gold, David wrote in the article's conclusion. He found wealth extracted from Depression-era desperation, hidden by a man who profited from others' suffering. The foundation he created doesn't absolve that original sin. It simply redistributes money that was taken from struggling families back to struggling families 80 years later. The article went viral. Media outlets picked it up. Think pieces proliferated about wealth inequality, inherited privilege, and whether finding hidden treasure made you morally different from inheriting it. Marcus's phone exploded with interview requests, book deal offers, and messages from people who wanted money, wanted answers, wanted him to confess that he was a fraud. Sofia called from Stanford, her voice tight with stress. Dad, people are sharing that article everywhere. My classmates are asking me about it. My professors mentioned it in class. Everyone knows. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Is it true? Did William Caldwell really cheat people? Marcus had spent the last 24 hours researching that exact question. The families David had interviewed had provided documentation, letters, contracts, receipts showing Caldwell buying gold at rates well below market value for people who had no other options. It looks like it might be true, Marcus said quietly. I didn't know. The notebook in the vault said the gold was legally acquired, but legally acquired doesn't mean ethically acquired. Caldwell took advantage of desperate people, just like thousands of other wealthy people did during the Depression. So what do we do? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Marcus spent the next week in consultation with Rebecca, his lawyers, financial advisors, and eventually an ethics professor from Princeton who'd written extensively about obligations regarding inherited wealth. The professor's name was Dr. Amelia Chong. She joined a video call from her campus office, shelves of books visible behind her. Mr. Rivera, we're dealing with a question philosophers have debated for centuries. Do we bear responsibility for harms committed by people we've never met to benefit people we'll never meet? In your case, William Caldwell may have harmed people 80 years ago. You benefited from that harm accidentally. What's your obligation now? Marcus thought carefully. I've already given away $50 million through the foundation. I've helped 25,000 families. Isn't that enough? That's for you to decide. But let me ask you this. If someone stole money from your family and hid it, and 80 years later someone else found it and donated half to charity while keeping half, would you think that was fair? The question landed like a punch. No, I want my money back. Exactly. The families David Chen interviewed, their ancestors were economically coerced into selling gold at unfair prices. That wealth was hidden and eventually came to you. You weren't responsible for the original harm, but you've benefited from it. The question is whether benefiting from historical injustice creates any obligation to try to address it. Even though I didn't know, even though I bought the property legally. Legal and ethical aren't the same thing, Mr. Rivera. You know that. You've been wrestling with it for 13 years. That's why you created the foundation in the first place. Dr. Chong was right. Marcus had always known the money felt complicated, had always carried guilt about the magnitude of his good fortune. This article had simply made explicit what he'd felt implicitly all along. "What would you do?" he asked her. "I try to make it right. Not because you're legally obligated, but because you're ethically capable. You have resources most people don't have. You can acknowledge historical harm and try to remedy it in ways others can't." The press conference happened 3 weeks later. Marcus stood at a podium in front of 50 journalists, cameras broadcasting live to news networks and social media platforms. Rebecca stood to his left. His lawyer stood to his right. Sofia had flown home from Stanford to be there, sitting in the front row for support. Marcus had spent 72 hours writing and rewriting his statement. He'd consulted with crisis management firms who told him to deny everything, with lawyers who told him to admit nothing, with advisors who told him this was a mistake that would haunt him forever. But he'd also talked to Sofia, who'd looked at him with her mother's eyes and said, "Dad, do what's right, not what's safe." He cleared his throat and began reading. 13 years ago, I bought a house for $500. Behind the wallpaper in a root cellar, I found a vault containing approximately 300 gold bars worth roughly $240 million. That discovery changed my life and my daughter's life in ways I'm still processing. Recent reporting has revealed that William Harrison Caldwell, the man who hid that gold, likely acquired at least some of it through predatory practices during the Depression. He bought gold from desperate families at unfair prices, taking advantage of economic collapse to build his hidden fortune. I didn't know this when I found the vault, but I know it now. I want to be clear, I acted legally. I purchased the property. The contents belonged to me. I paid taxes on the gold's value. I followed every rule I understood at the time. But legal doesn't mean right. After extensive consultation with ethicists, historians, and the families interviewed in David Chen's article, I'm announcing the following steps. First, the Rivera Foundation's endowment will be increased to $100 million. This requires me to contribute an additional $15 million from my personal assets. Second, I'm establishing a reparations fund with $20 million to compensate the families who can prove their ancestors sold gold to William Caldwell under coercive circumstances. An independent committee will review claims and determine appropriate compensation. Third, I'm committing to fund a research project documenting Depression-era predatory financial practices, with specific focus on how wealthy individuals exploited economic crisis for personal gain. This history needs to be known and taught. Fourth, I'm personally reaching out to each family David Chen identified to apologize. Not because I committed the original harm, but because I benefited from it. And benefiting from injustice, even unknowingly, creates an obligation to acknowledge it. These steps will cost me approximately $35 million. That leaves me with roughly $41 million in personal assets. More than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. More than I ever dreamed of having when I was working warehouse shifts and living in a motel. I can't undo what William Caldwell did 80 years ago. I can't restore what was taken from families during the Depression, but I can acknowledge historical harm. I can try to make partial amends, and I can commit to using my resources in ways that honor the suffering my fortune was built on. To the families Caldwell hurt, I'm sorry. You deserved better then. You deserve acknowledgement now. I hope these steps begin to address that. Marcus looked up from his prepared statement. The room was silent, journalists processing what they'd just heard. This wasn't the defensive posturing they'd expected. This was something else entirely. I'll take questions now. The first journalist stood. "Mr. Rivera, some critics will say you're only doing this because you got caught. That without David Chen's article, you'd have kept all the money and never investigated its origins. How do you respond?" Marcus nodded slowly. "They're probably right. I created the foundation because I felt guilty about having so much. But I didn't investigate deeply enough into where the money came from originally. I should have. I was so focused on what I would do with the fortune that I didn't adequately question how it came to exist. That's a failure on my part." Another journalist. $41 million is still a massive fortune. Why not give away everything except enough to live modestly? Because I'm human and flawed and not a saint. I'm trying to do better, to acknowledge harm and make amends. But I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm keeping enough to ensure my daughter's future is secure, to live comfortably, to have resources if I need them. I'm not apologizing for that. A third journalist. What do you say to people who think you should return everything to Caldwell's descendants? Gerald Caldwell sued me years ago, claiming exactly that. The court ruled against him. Legally, that's settled. But ethically, I think there's a difference between Caldwell's descendants, who chose not to look for the gold for decades, and the families he harmed, who had their wealth extracted through coercion. I'm prioritizing the people who were hurt over the people who weren't hurt enough to go looking for what was taken. The questions continued for 40 minutes. Marcus answered each one as honestly as he could, not hiding behind legal protections or public relations spin. When it was over, he felt exhausted but cleaner somehow. Like he'd been carrying weight he hadn't fully acknowledged and had finally set it down. Sofia hugged him as they left the press conference. "You did good, Dad. Really good. I just made myself a target for every critic and opportunist in the country. Maybe. But you also showed people that you can benefit from something and still acknowledge it was wrong. That's important. People need to see that." The backlash was immediate and severe. Conservative commentators called him a virtue-signaling fool who was destroying his own wealth to appease woke critics. Progressive commentators said his gestures were inadequate, that he should give away everything. Financial experts said he was setting a dangerous precedent that would discourage people from reporting found assets. But there were other voices too. Families who'd been helped by the foundation, thanking him for his honesty. Ethicists praising his willingness to grapple with uncomfortable truths. Educators saying they'd use his case study to teach about wealth, responsibility, and inherited advantages. And most importantly, the families Caldwell had harmed reached out. Not all of them were angry. Some were grateful for acknowledgement. Others wanted to know more about what their ancestors had lost. A few declined compensation, saying they'd rather the money go to current families in need. Marcus met with each family personally over the next 6 months, traveled to their homes, listened to their stories, looked at photographs and documents they'd preserved. He heard about grandparents who'd sold gold to Caldwell to avoid foreclosure, who'd gotten a fraction of what the gold was worth, who'd lived the rest of their lives regretting that desperate choice. One woman, Ethel Morrison, was 93 years old. Her grandfather had sold 40 gold coins to Caldwell in 1933 for $12 each. At market rates, they'd been worth $20 each. That $320 difference might not sound like much, but in 1933, it was several months of living expenses. Her family had struggled for years afterward. "I don't blame you, young man," Ethel said, her hand shaking slightly as she held a photograph of her grandfather. "You didn't do what he did, but I thank you for acknowledging it happened, for saying out loud that my grandfather wasn't foolish or weak. He was desperate, and someone took advantage of that desperation. Knowing that someone finally admits that truth, that matters more than money." Marcus left that meeting in tears. He'd approached the reparations fund as a financial obligation, a number to calculate and distribute. But these were real people carrying real wounds across generations. His fortune had been built on their ancestors' suffering, and no amount of money could fully address that. By year 15, the immediate crisis had passed. The reparations fund had distributed payments to 47 families. The research project was underway at 3 universities. The foundation continued its work with an enhanced endowment. Marcus's personal wealth had stabilized at around $45 million after careful investment of what remained. He'd become a reluctant expert on ethical wealth management. Universities invited him to speak. Nonprofits asked for his advice. People who'd inherited fortunes or won lawsuits or sold companies sought his guidance on grappling with sudden wealth's moral implications. "The key thing I've learned," Marcus told an audience at a philanthropy conference, "is that there's no such thing as innocent money. All wealth comes from somewhere. All fortunes are built on somebody's labor, somebody's sacrifice, somebody's loss. That doesn't mean wealth is inherently evil. But it does mean we have to think carefully about what obligations come with having more than we need." After the speech, a young woman approached him. She was maybe 25, wearing an expensive suit, but carrying herself with uncertainty. "Mr. Rivera, My name is Amanda Blackstone. I inherited $80 million when my grandfather died last year. He made his fortune in real estate development in the 1960s and 70s. I just learned that many of his deals involved displacing communities of color through urban renewal projects. I don't know what to do with this money. It feels dirty. Marcus looked at this young woman, carrying weight similar to what he'd carried. What do you want to do? I want to give it away. All of it. I want to fund housing justice organizations, compensate displaced families if any can be found, build affordable housing in neighborhoods my grandfather helped destroy. But everyone tells me that's crazy, that I should keep enough to be comfortable, that I can't fix historical wrongs, that I'm being performative. What do you think? Amanda met his eyes. I think I didn't earn this money. I think it came from harm, and I think keeping it makes me complicit in that harm, even if I didn't cause it. Marcus nodded slowly. Then you've already figured out what you need to do. The question isn't whether to give it away. The question is how to give it away in ways that actually help rather than just making you feel better. How did you figure that out? I made mistakes. A lot of them. I created a foundation without fully understanding the communities it served. I thought money solved problems when really it just created opportunities for solutions. I had to learn to listen more than I spoke, to trust people who understood struggles I'd only experienced briefly. He pulled out a business card. This is Rebecca Torres, the CEO of my foundation. She can connect you with people who do housing justice work. They'll help you think through how to deploy your resources effectively. But Amanda, here's the most important thing. Don't let anyone tell you that acknowledging harm is performative. Refusing to benefit from injustice is a legitimate ethical choice. You'll face criticism no matter what you decide. You might as well face it while doing something you believe is right. Amanda took the card with trembling hands. Thank you. I've been feeling so alone with this. You're not alone. There are more of us than you'd think. People trying to figure out how to live ethically with resources we didn't earn through means we can't fully defend. It's hard work, but it's necessary work. He watched Amanda walk away and thought about the community that had formed around these questions. People grappling with inherited wealth, lottery winnings, legal settlements, sudden fortunes that came with complicated histories. They found each other at conferences and through referrals, sharing strategies and failures and the exhausting work of trying to be responsible stewards of money they hadn't asked for. Sofia graduated from Stanford at 21 with a degree in public policy and a thesis on intergenerational wealth transfer and social mobility. She'd been recruited by 3 different nonprofits and 2 government agencies. But she surprised Marcus by choosing to join the Rivera Foundation as a program officer. I thought you'd want to make your own path, Marcus said when she told him her decision. I'm making my own path. The foundation exists because of our family's weird history, but it does real work. I want to help make that work better. Plus, I've spent my whole life watching you figure out how to be responsible with money you didn't earn. I learned something from that. I want to put it into practice. Sofia brought new energy to the foundation. She pushed for more community input in program design. She challenged assumptions about what struggling families needed. She used data analytics to measure outcomes and adjust strategies. Within 2 years, she'd become Rebecca's obvious successor. Marcus watched his daughter flourish and felt something he hadn't expected: relief. The foundation would outlive him. The work would continue. Sofia understood both the privilege of their resources and the responsibility that came with them. Whatever happened to him, the gold bar's legacy would be in capable hands. But there was one piece of unfinished business that haunted Marcus. Patricia Chen, the realtor who'd helped him buy the house and connected him with James Whitmore's team, had taken her 10% and disappeared. $28 million paid to her over the course of the liquidation. She'd moved to Singapore, Marcus had heard, living in luxury on money she'd earned by being in the right place at the right time. He tried to contact her several times over the years, especially after David Chen's article revealed the gold's problematic origins. But Patricia never responded. She'd taken her commission and vanished, apparently unconcerned with questions about whether the money was ethically complicated. Until year 17, when Patricia reached out unexpectedly. The email was brief. Marcus, I've been following your journey. I need to talk to you about something I should have told you 13 years ago. Can we meet? Marcus flew to Singapore with Sofia. They met Patricia at an outdoor cafe overlooking the harbor. She looked older, worn down in ways wealth shouldn't cause. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said. "I wasn't sure you would after I've avoided you for so long." "What do you want to tell me?" Marcus asked, not interested in pleasantries. Patricia took a deep breath. "When I showed you that house, I already knew about the vault. Not that it had gold specifically, but that there was a hidden room in the root cellar. The county assessor's office had old blueprints showing an addition that wasn't reflected in the current property layout. I'd done research on William Caldwell. I knew he'd been wealthy during the Depression. I suspected something valuable might be hidden there." Marcus felt cold spread through his chest. "You knew." "I knew enough to suspect. That's why I pushed the sale through so fast. Why I arranged for James Whitmore's team to be ready immediately. Why I made sure we opened that vault before the county could investigate. I manipulated you, Marcus. I saw a desperate father who'd sign papers quickly, and I used that desperation to enrich both of us." Sofia leaned forward, her voice hard. "Why are you telling us this now?" "Because I can't live with it anymore. I took $28 million knowing I'd engineered the situation to benefit from your father's desperation. The same kind of predatory advantage-taking that William Caldwell used. I've spent 4 years in therapy trying to justify what I did. I can't. So what do you want?" Marcus asked. "Forgiveness? Absolution. I want to give the money back. All $28 million. I've already arranged the transfer. It'll hit your foundation's account this week." Marcus sat back, stunned. "Patricia, that's your entire fortune." "It's not my fortune. It's money I got through manipulation and exploitation. Just like Caldwell's gold. I thought I could live with it, could enjoy the luxury and ignore how I got it. But watching you grapple publicly with the ethics of your wealth, seeing you give millions away to try to address historical harm, I realized I was just another person profiting from someone else's vulnerability. I can't be that person anymore." Sofia spoke softly. "What will you do? Where will you live?" "I'm moving back to Texas. I've already accepted a job with a real estate firm, doing honest work for honest commissions. I'll live modestly. I'll rebuild from a foundation that doesn't make me sick to look at." Patricia pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "This is every document related to my research before showing you that house. My notes on Caldwell, the blueprint anomaly, my calculation of what the vault might contain. I want you to have proof that I knew, that I manipulated the situation. If you want to sue me for fraud, I won't fight it." Marcus looked at the envelope without touching it. Part of him wanted to rage at Patricia, to demand she explain how she could have used his desperation so callously. But another part understood. She'd seen an opportunity and taken it. Just like he'd seen an opportunity when he opened that vault. The line between lucky and exploitative was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. "I'm not going to sue you," he said finally. "You're returning the money voluntarily. That takes courage. More courage than most people have." "It's not courage. It's just exhaustion from carrying weight I shouldn't have taken on." They sat in silence for a moment, 3 people connected by gold bars and ethical failures and the slow, painful work of trying to be better. "The foundation will use your $28 million well," Sofia said. "It'll help thousands of families. That's something." Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I hope so. I hope it's enough to balance what I did." "Nothing balances anything," Marcus said quietly. "That's what I've learned. You can't perfectly compensate for harm. You can only acknowledge it and try to do better going forward. The universe doesn't keep score. You just have to live with your choices." Patricia left the cafe, walking away from the luxury she'd built and toward a future that required starting over. Marcus watched her go and thought about how everyone involved in his story had made compromises, had benefited from systems that exploited others, had carried weight they'd rather not examine. William Caldwell had exploited desperate families. Patricia had exploited Marcus's desperation. James Whitmore's team had taken 25%, knowing the gold's origins were questionable. Even Marcus himself had kept $45 million while giving the rest away, making choices about how much responsibility was enough. There were no heroes in this story. Just people trying to navigate complicated situations with incomplete information and competing interests. The best anyone could do was acknowledge harm, make amends where possible, and commit to doing better going forward. Do you think she'll be okay? Sofia asked as they left the cafe. I don't know, but I think she'll be more okay than she was. Sometimes that's all we can aim for. They flew back to Texas the next day. Patricia's $28 million arrived in the foundation's account 3 days later, increasing the endowment to $128 million. With that level of funding, they could expand to 30 cities, help 50,000 families annually, create programs that didn't exist yet. Marcus looked at the bank statement and thought about the journey from that $500 house to this moment. 17 years of wrestling with wealth and responsibility and the question of what obligations came with having more than you needed. He still didn't have perfect answers, but he had better answers than when he'd started. And he had something perhaps more valuable than answers. He had commitment to keep asking the questions, to keep examining his choices, to keep trying to use his resources in ways that acknowledge their complicated origins while creating something good. The gold was gone, converted to cash and investments and programs and reparations. But its legacy remained in every family helped, every question asked, every person who looked at his example and thought more carefully about their own relationship with wealth and responsibility. It wasn't redemption exactly. You couldn't redeem gold acquired through exploitation. But it was transformation, taking something built on harm and trying to create something that addressed harm. Imperfectly, incompletely, but persistently. And sometimes, Marcus had learned, persistence was the only virtue that mattered. Everything else was just trying to figure out how to live with choices that could never be fully defended, but had to be made anyway. That evening, Marcus stood in his backyard watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Sofia came out to join him, 2 glasses of wine in her hands. To Patricia, Sofia said, raising her glass. To Patricia, Marcus echoed. And to everyone trying to do better, even when it cost them everything. They drank in silence. Father and daughter who'd been saved by gold and spent 17 years figuring out what salvation required. The answer, incomplete as it was, felt like enough. At least for today. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.